What's up, everyone? James Lynch here. This is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be taking a look at the UFC light heavyweight title fight, June 11th, Singapore, UFC 275, between Glover Teixeira, the champ, and the challenger, Jiri Prochazka. But before we dive into the stats, I give you my preview and my pick. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. I'm posting content on this channel every single day, and it really helps out the channel a lot if you can do those three simple and very quick things here. Also, make sure you check out some of the other early look previews I have for some other fights that are up on the channel, including Ioane and Jacek and Weili Zhang. I'm going to be doing these every single week because I know you guys like the content. All right, let's dig into it here. Glover Teixeira, Jiri Prochazka, Singapore Indoor Stadium, UFC 275, June 11th. Can't wait for this fight. This is going to be a real good one here. And we'll just sort of go over, everything from a stats perspective. I'll give you my pick at the end. And then after the video, if you guys want to, give me your picks, give me your thoughts on this breakdown, I'd love to hear from you because always enjoy talking about the fights. So let's start first with the fact this is a 5-round fight. It's for the light heavyweight title, Glover Teixeira, Jiri Prochazka. Let's start with Glover Teixeira here first. You can see it there in the tail of the tape, but we'll dig in a little bit deeper here. Glover Teixeira, 42 years old, going to be turning 43 on October 28th. He is 6'2" with a 76-inch reach, so no advantages physically there for Glover Teixeira in this fight. He's a former Brazilian national wrestling team member. He's the second oldest UFC champion in UFC history behind Randy Couture. He's currently the oldest champion on the UFC roster. He actually probably is one of the oldest fighters too. I'm not sure the exact stats on that. But yeah, he is the oldest first-time champion in UFC history. Of course, Couture had won titles previously. So quite the feat there for Glover Teixeira. And I think a great example of why, and I see this a lot with fans where you can't write fighters off after a couple losses. He's proof. If you keep going, you keep giving it your all, you eventually can be UFC champion. Glover is proof of that. So I think he's just a great story here, and that's why this fight is so much more exciting. Of course, Glover's got the accolades as well. He's a second-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. His ground game is exceptional, but I mean, he's knocking guys out too. That's what makes Glover such a great fighter. He can do it all, right? He's got the knockout power, and he's got the really great ground game as well. Now, interesting thing here with Glover Teixeira is he did not have any amateur fights. I mean, we see this every now and then. I think I did a breakdown last week where there were no amateur fights. Made his MMA debut in June of 2002, and he lost. Remember, this is something I was telling you guys, I forget which breakdown it was a couple weeks ago, where, there's a lot of fighters who lost their pro debut. So again, doesn't mean just because you lose your debut, if you're new fighters out there, you can still make things happen. So lost his first fight to Eric Schwartz. Never heard of the guy, but there you go. Interestingly enough, just a couple fights in, he lost to Ed Herman, who's still fighting in the UFC today. So kind of interesting and kind of crazy to show just, how long Glover has been fighting here. Glover Teixeira made his debut, like I said, in June 2002. He didn't make his UFC debut until May of 2012. And sort of the story back in the day when he made his debut was that, the UFC wanted to sign Glover a lot earlier. It's just he had some visa issues. So that's why you didn't see him in there after amassing such a good record. He was a good friend and training partner of Chuck Liddell back in the day. So, obviously Chuck wanted to see him in there too. So, we could have seen Glover in the UFC a lot earlier, but like I said, he just had some visa issues. And that's why you'll see here he was fighting in Brazil when he was living in the US. It's because he couldn't get a visa secured. So a little interesting fact there as well. And Glover Teixeira has a pretty interesting UFC record. He's 16-5. Like I mentioned, it wasn't all rosy. He does have 5 losses, 13 stoppage wins. I mean, this is a guy that clearly does not get paid by the hour, and it's a variety of finishes, right? TKO, submissions, like we've seen him do it all. So just really impressive stuff there from Glover. Some notable wins in his career. I was kind of looking through. He's fought a lot of really good competition here. The Rampage Jackson win that he had back in 2013, I thought was a good win at the time because Jackson wasn't too far removed from him being the champ. So that was a good win at the time. He, of course, defeated Ryan Bader in a fight that was just an absolute slugfest. And it just so happened that he was the one to knock out Bader in that fight. Bader, of course, going on to do great things in Bellator. Also beat Rashad Evans, who at the time was, I don't think, completely gone at that point, but good win there. Jared Cannonier, who competes at middleweight now, but that's still a good win considering, Cannonier is quite the talent. He's actually fighting for the middleweight title coming up here in July. And then some other good wins here. Anthony Smith, obviously, Thiago Santos, and Jan Blachowicz. Those are 3 of the best wins you could possibly get in the weight class. Really solid. And the fact that he was able to finish all of those guys in the fight really speaks volumes to how good Glover is as a fighter, and the cardio being on point too, which is great. What else do we got here as far as some other things? What else do we have here about Glover? We have the fact that it's going to be a bit of a layout. Oh, sorry. Notable losses. Got to mention that. Sorry, I lost track there for a second. Some notable losses, you can see it there: John Jones, Phil Davis, Anthony Johnson, Alexander Gustafsson, Corey Anderson. What was interesting is when he got knocked out by Johnson and then Gustafsson just 2 fights later, there was a school of thought that maybe Glover's chin was gone. Clearly that hasn't been the case, but again, it's just interesting to see. Typically when you see a fighter knocked out that quickly, in the Johnson fight and in the Gustafsson fight, him getting finished late just goes to show you how durable this guy has been throughout his entire career. Now, as far as layoffs, Glover's been pretty active. If you look at it here, he's been fighting at least twice a year since he started his UFC career. However, going into this fight, he's going to have about a 224-day layoff going into the fight. This fight was supposed to take place on May 7th. They ended up moving the fight. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's glad we're still getting the fight. I think that makes sense. Now, Glover has had some injuries throughout his career here. You can see it. Let's start first with the Rashad Evans injury. He had a knee injury in that fight. He was supposed to fight Rashad at UFC Fight Night 61 back in February of 2015. Then he was supposed to fight Misha Serkinov back in October of 2017, but had a minor injury in that one. And then I think people forget he was supposed to fight Jimmy Manuwa in 2018, but had a shoulder injury. I wonder how that fight would have played out if they would have fought. Of course, that never ended up happening. Glover, like I mentioned, the finishes there, 13 finishes. He hasn't really been in any close fights except for one, which is such a weird thing considering the opponent, Nikita Krylov, winning a split decision in that fight. I went back and looked at the media scores for that one. That was back in September of 2019. 12 media members scoring the fight for Glover Teixeira, just 4 for Krylov. That was in Vancouver. That was the last Canadian UFC event, interestingly enough. And I thought Glover won, but again, 4 people thought that Krylov did enough to get it done. So there you go. That is Glover Teixeira in a nutshell. Just a great story, great, well-rounded fighter, and just an awesome champion. And you guys have already seen the Pros Picks videos, I'm sure. A lot of guys picking Teixeira because they like the guy, right? Like he's obviously had a huge impact on MMA as a whole. So amazing that he's been able to do all this at 42 years of age. Okay, let's get into his opponent here, Jiri Prochazka. As you can see there, Jiri Prochazka, a 28-3-1 record. He is won 25 of his fights by knockout, or KO or TKO, I should say. 2 wins by submission and 1 decision. I mean, that's incredible. 28 fights, 25 finishes. Now, granted, some of the competition he was fighting earlier on, maybe not the best, but still, it's impressive that he's had that many knockouts. 25 KO, TKO wins, which is amazing. Jiri is the number 2 ranked light heavyweight in the division right now. He's 29 years old, going to be turning 30 in October, as you can see there. He is 6'3" with a 80-inch reach. And so he'll be 13 years younger than Glover. He's 1 inch taller and has a 4-inch reach advantage. So going to be a little bit bigger in this fight. Mention it there. I didn't mention it. I'm going to mention it now. He is the inaugural and former Ryzen light heavyweight champion, which is a good feat. And he's the inaugural and former Czech GCF light heavyweight champion, which I know was something else notable in his career. You can see a lot of fights here for Ryzen and GCF. Gladiator championship fighting, not to be confused with Gladiator Challenge, which was an old promotion in California. You can see there, Jiri did not have any amateur fights. He made his MMA debut in April of 2012, which is interesting because Glover Teixeira made his UFC debut 1 month later. Just shows you how the age gap is there. So again, Jiri making his MMA debut, his pro debut in April of 2012. Glover UFC debut in May of 2012, which is interesting. Did not make his UFC debut until July of 2020. However, you look at some of the names he did fight in Ryzen. Again, I talked about overall his competition not being amazing, but you look at, some names here. Nemkov, right, who's in Bellator, the Bellator champ. You've got, Bruno Capoloza, who we've seen do quite well in PFL. Muhammad Lawal, although he did lose to Mo Lawal as well, too, and has a win over CB Dalloway, the UFC vet. Fabio Maldonado, UFC vet. So I had a couple interesting fights over there, but you look at some of the other names, maybe not as strong here. So again, he's only had 2 UFC fights. He's 2-0. The notable wins are, both of his wins are notable. Volkan Ozdemir knocking him out, and then knocking out Dominic Reyes in just an incredible fight there. Some of his notable losses, he doesn't have any losses in the UFC, but if you want to look outside the UFC, Muhammad Lawal, he was knocked out in that fight by King Mo back in 2015. Also lost to Edliov, who was 6-4 at the time. And how about this? Bojan Velikovic, who you remember fought in the UFC. He was in PFL as well. He fought Darren Till in the UFC. He lost to him. I'm not sure how. It just says loss, but that's kind of interesting looking back that that was his first loss ever, was against Bojan Velikovic, who I don't even know what Bojan's been doing these days, but obviously a training partner at Elevation Fight Team. Now, one thing you can point out with Jiri is the layoffs. So, going from making his debut in Ryzen to, Yeah, going from CB all the way to making his UFC debut. He went from December to July, so a bit of a layoff there. The layoff from Volkan to Reyes was actually 295 days, so that's a bit of a long stretch from going from that to this fight. If you remember, supposed to fight Reyes due in February, but then they had to reschedule the fight due to the COVID stuff. And then when he steps in the cage against Glover, it will be 407 days since his last fight. That's a really long layoff. But look, if you got a title shot in your horizon, you wait around for it, right? I mean, you got it. Why risk fighting anyone else? So yeah, I think this was the right call here, despite the fact that it's going to be 407 days in between fights for Jiri Prochazka compared to just 200 and 24 for Glover Teixeira. So that's almost, half there, if you look at it there. Safe to say Jiri Prochazka has never been in any close fights, and he's never really had any major injuries. I was kind of looking back here. Yuri's been pretty healthy throughout his career, so that's another bonus, sort of another factor in this fight. Let's look at some of the odds here. I always like to show you guys a bunch of variety, of different books as far as how people are picking in this one. You can see here Jiri Prochazka about a 2-1 favorite on most books, which is understandable. Like I mentioned, a 13-year age gap. Yuri's a bit bigger, and Jiri just has, I think, a very unique style. You don't really see anyone that moves like him in the division. People that don't, finish their opponents like he does in the division. Just a bag of everything. I mean, this guy really brings it all to the table here. So how do you break down this fight? Well, you look at it there, you look at a couple things. Number one, you look at the fact that Glover's been pretty durable over the last couple fights, right? Like, he hasn't been put away. In fact, that's what ended up costing his opponents their fights. If you look at, Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith, they had early success in those fights, but it was the fact that they tried to finish him, couldn't, ran out of steam, and then, of course, Glover gets late finishes on both of them. Anthony Smith in round 5, Thiago Santos in round 3. So that's the thing. If you can't take Glover out, he can usually take over the rest of the fight. So that's sort of the big if in this fight. Can Jiri... I think if Jiri wins, it's going to be early on in the fight, and I don't think it's going to be late, because if it goes later, we have no clue how Yuri's cardio is going to hold up later in the fight. Glover has that edge for sure, where he's been in fights that have gone longer. And you look here with Jiri, I mean, what's the longest fight he's been in? These are all first-round finishes for the most part. So how's his cardio going to hold up? That's a big question. The other question is the wrestling, right? We know that he went to Fight Ready and trained there for this camp just a few weeks. I know now he went back home to Czech Republic. At the time of recording this, what's today? Today is May 16th. He's in Thailand right now, so working, I guess, some more on some striking. But I do wonder about the wrestling, because you saw Teixeira have success against Jan Blachowicz in his last fight, where he was able to take him down and pretty much control him. So that's the other question mark in this fight, is Jiri Prochazka's ground game. How's it going to look here? So that's the big question. So I think if you wanted to play this safe, you could probably pick Glover in this fight, right? He's fought better opposition. He's tough to finish. If you can't finish him, I would favor Glover later in the fight. But you almost have to, then assume that Yuri's not going to be able to put him out. And I think that's a little bit dangerous here, because Jiri is extremely, extremely dangerous. We even saw Dominic Reyes in his last fight knock out Jiri briefly. Jiri gets to his senses and then knocks out Reyes himself. So what it comes down to for me is this, and I've said this before with Charles Oliveira, with certain fighters, when they're doing things that are special. Jiri Prochazka is a special fighter. He does things that you don't expect. That knockout over Reyes, the spinning elbow, that's not something you see every day in MMA. I think he does things that you almost can't prepare for, because he's so unorthodox, so crazy when it comes to his fight style here. And as much as Glover's seen everything he has in his career, I don't believe he's fought a fighter like Jiri before. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an opponent I'm missing here, but I think Jiri is a very unique specimen. Add in the fact that he's younger, add in the fact that he's bigger, I think Jiri is going to win this fight. Now, I'm making a big if here, because Jiri does have a long layoff coming into the fight. Jiri, we don't know how he is on the ground. We don't know how he is with his wrestling. We're taking some chances here by making this pick, but I'm banking on the fact that Jiri is going to take him out. You have to think at some point with Glover. And again, I know that the last couple fights, like Santos and Smith and these guys, they have power. Jan Blachowicz especially, he's got power. These guys can take you out, but at 42 years of age, you got to think at some point Glover's going to get finished. And I think this is the fight. I think Jiri is the guy to do it. I think Yuri's too tricky. I think Jiri, just knowing him and knowing, how he prepares for fights, I think he's covered every angle. And like I said, I do have some concerns about the wrestling and the ground game, but I think it's not going to matter, because I think Yuri's going to keep this standing, and I think he's going to be too fast and too powerful for Glover Teixeira. So my official pick for this fight is Jiri Prochazka by second round knockout. I think he goes in there, just unloads on on Glover Teixeira, and I think he gets it done. Now, if we're talking about a Glover Teixeira late finish or Glover Teixeira decision from this fight, I would not be shocked whatsoever. Again, Jiri has to go out there and finish Glover. I don't see Jiri winning a decision. He's never gone the distance in his career. I'm not banking on him winning a decision here now. But And I also don't think Yuri's going to submit Glover Teixeira as well. So maybe you can find some interesting prop bets there. But I think it's knockout or bust for Yuri, and I think he gets it done here. But like I said, I do have some concerns because of Teixeira's durability, like we saw in Santos and Smith fights, and also the fact that Glover has fought better opposition overall. So that's my pick, Jiri Prochazka, second round finish. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, I'm happy to talk about this fight with you guys. As long as we're being respectful here, if you can understand my point of view, I'll try and understand yours as well. Again, I do expect people to pick Glover in this fight too, because this is a very close fight, similar to how close the fight with Jan Blachowicz was last time. But like I said, I'm going Jiri with the second round knockout. So let me know what you think. Leave your comments in the section. I'll try and respond to everyone I can. What did you think of some of the points I brought up today as well? Also, if there's any other fights you guys want me to break down over the next little bit, these are fights that are well in advance. I have a list of, obviously the main events and some other key fights as well. But if there's any fights you want me to break down in particular, let me know in the comments. Happy to get your feedback on this one. I love doing this show every week. So for me, it's cool to kind of, take an early look at some of these fights and break them down and give a pick and all that. Lastly, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. It really helps the channel a lot. It's really easy for you guys to do, and it really just helps the views and overall content on this channel. So if you guys could do that, that would be awesome. I'll have another edition of Early Look likely out next week as well, so make sure you tune in here. My name is James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you tuning into this whole thing, and I'll see you next time.